Hello everyone, nice to meet you all. My name is Inma and I'm a freelance artist from Spain, hence my weird English accent. I'm so sorry. So anyway, I work mainly on video games, I work on visual novels and such, and on my free time I also work on a webcomic that you can read for free on Webtoon and Tapas, which is called The Violinist and the Nerd, and it's boys love. So anyway, I'm here today to talk about working as an artist and making money as an artist. When I was little, I knew that I wanted to be an artist, but I didn't know if I could make this my job. I thought, in fact, that I couldn't. But over the years, I learned that yes, it is possible. And I would like to share my experience, things I learned on the way with you. Of course, this is my personal experience, so it might not fit your situation. So don't take anything I say as absolute truth. And please, when you become a full-time artist too, come back and tell us about it. I'm looking forward to hearing from other artists and what experience they had. I think we all can learn from each other. Anyway, let's start with everything that I gathered that I want to share with you. So to the question, how much can I make as an artist? There is no simple answer to that. Some of the most popular artists make like 40,000 a month, which is not my case. But that's a goal that's very difficult to reach. It shouldn't be your goal. I mean, I think your goal should be to make enough money to make a living, not to be rich, because it's very hard to be rich. Most people don't get there. So if that's your goal, you're going to be very frustrated. Or maybe not, but most probably. So I think that what you need to ask yourself is how much should I make to have the lifestyle that I want to have? And how much you make is not the only thing that will determine how good your life is going to be, because that depends also on where you live. Because depending on the place, life might be more expensive or cheaper, etc. And I'm going to give you one example. I live in the south of Spain, and here you can buy one cup of coffee for 1.5 euros in most places. But when I went to Paris, for a convention once, whenever I wanted to have a cup of coffee, I was charged 4 euros. I don't know if this is normal or if I just went to the wrong places, but that's how much I paid. So imagine that I make 2,000 euros in Spain. That means that I can buy approximately 1,333 cups of coffee. Okay. Now imagine that I make 4,000 euros a month, but I live in Paris. I'm making twice as much. But now I can only buy 1,000 cups of coffee. So that means that I'm making twice as much money living in Paris, but I cannot buy as many cups of coffee as I could living in Spain for half the income. I know this is a very simple example, but I just want you to take into account that how expensive life is where you live will determine how much you need to have the lifestyle that you want to have. And that's very important that you decide on that. And also, if you're a freelance artist, you can work from home, so you can kind of decide where you want to live. I once heard the story of someone who had a blog, and he was making, I think it was like 500 a month. And he thought, okay, this cannot be my main job here where I live, but what countries could I live properly with such an amount, and he just moved there. Personally, I don't want to leave my country, and I'm not saying that that's something you have to do, but it's something that you can take into account if you want to. So where do you start when you want to become an artist? Well, the answer seems pretty obvious, but you start by drawing a lot. When you want to monetize your work, there are many reasons why people might not be interested in paying for it. One reason is that maybe they don't like your stuff, or maybe they just didn't find you. If the reason is that they don't like your stuff, then the only way to get better at it is to draw a lot. Just keep on drawing. Even if you cannot sell what you are creating, just draw for fun and draw to learn how to make it better until you can catch people's attention. If the reason why nobody is buying from you is the fact that people didn't find you, then what you have to do is to keep on drawing and keep on posting your art online. Because being there, posting your stuff is the only way to be found by potential clients. It is very important to build an audience. I remember the first time that I wanted to open commissions. I wasn't very good back then, but I wasn't bad either. So I thought, okay, maybe someone will want to pay for my art, and I was poor, so so I opened commissions in a forum, and I refreshed and refreshed the page each day, and hardly anyone was interested. I was very frustrated and I was very sad, but I just went on with my life, and I kept on drawing because that was what I wanted to do and what I had fun doing, and I was determined to get better. Sometime later, I got into a popular fandom, which was Tsubasa by Clamp. I'm sure many of you know of this manga. And I became a big fan, especially of Kurofai. So I started drawing tons of fan arts and tons of doujinshis, and I didn't realize at the time, but I started growing my audience because people kept seeing me around because I drew so much for this series. Then one day I decided I wanted to try opening commissions again on my DeviantArt, but I had a very, very bad experience before, so I was sure that again nobody would be interested in my art. But this time I filled all the slots that I opened within 10 minutes. So what had changed? I was a bit better at drawing, but not that much, because I'm a very slow learner, and this wasn't a long time before my first try with commissions. But this time, the difference this time was that I had an audience. I had people that were interested in what I was doing. They were following me. So when I opened commissions, I had people who wanted to buy them. So what's the moral to this story? To me, it would be that you need an audience to be able to sell your art. It is true that joining a popular fandom and drawing fan arts of it will give you an audience faster. But on the one hand, I don't want you to think this is something that you have to do. You don't have to. If that's not something that works for you, if you don't like drawing stuff of animes or video games that you don't like, then just don't do it. Just draw whatever you feel like drawing, whatever makes you happy, because that's when you are going to show the best you can do, when you feel comfortable drawing what you're doing. But on the other hand, I don't want you to feel like this is a bad thing to do, to get into a popular fandom just to grow your audience faster. Many people find it fake, you're just doing it for popularity. Well, I mean, yes, this is a job. And if you need an audience to be able to monetize your work, then I think there's nothing wrong with it. Don't let other people judge you over it, and definitely don't judge other people if they do it. Just let everybody go their own way and do things their way. Just remember, art is a job, so there's nothing wrong if that is your way of building your own audience. As for me, these days I only draw whatever I want to draw, because trying to join popular fandoms never really worked for me. But I don't judge people who do that. I mean, if they can, why not? The more you draw for a popular fandom, the more people are going to be happy to see your art. So I think it's everybody wins. Okay, so how do you find a job as an artist? First of all, I want to tell you that there are many different types of job you can have as an artist. When I was little, I thought that the only chance I had to get an art job was to work for a company, to be hired by a company. And that's just not true. There are so many ways in which you can make money off your art. I'm going to name just a few. You can work for a company, or you can work for particulars drawing commissions, or you can sell merchandise with your art, or you can make a Patreon and build your audience there, or you can draw your own manga and sell it at cons or self-publish it, etc. The list is really long, and I'm sure there are many jobs that I didn't even think about yet and that you might discover on the way. But just don't think that working for a company is the only way in which you can make money as an artist. It's not true. Some people seem to think that if you work for particulars drawing commissions, that is not a real job, that you're only a real artist if you work for a company that releases real products. Well, I have to disagree. I think that so long as you are getting paid, that's a job. You're working as an artist. It doesn't matter if the final product is a video game on a store or a book or just a post on social media. What matters is that there's money on your bank account. Money is what makes it a job. So I said that, but I understand that for some people there is a special pleasure in the fact of seeing their art in actual products, like in books, stores, video games and such. But let me tell you something. So I told you that I thought that I could only be an illustrator if I worked for a company, right? So back when I thought this way, I started sending my portfolio to many companies to see if any of them would be interested in having me work for them. So I got portfolios printed, I emailed them, I was searching for, I went around Steam looking for indie game companies and finding them online, sending them my art. Then I looked for books on Amazon and looking for the publisher, sending them my stuff as well. And do you know how many of them replied or were interested in my art? The answer is none. So since there was no luck for me sending stuff to companies, to real companies, so that's when I decided to open commissions online. So if no company was interested in my art, then I would work for particulars. And it seemed that many particulars were interested in my art. So I started working a lot. I started posting so much art online daily that a lot of companies started to contact me to work on their projects and such. And then I started working on games, I started working on books, I created mascots for events, and so many things that I could have never done if I had not started by posting my art online, by working on commissions for particulars. So, even if working on commissions is not your ideal job because you want something else, just know that it might open the doors for you to work at actual companies, because if they see your art around, then they can contact you. And it is very hard to actually walk to someone and get a job from them. Most of the time, it is the company that looks for the artist rather than the other way around. Aside from working for other people, you can also make your own projects. There are places like Patreon where you can offer whatever content you like monthly in exchange for money. If you check websites like graphtreon.com, you can see how much top Patreon creators are making. And even though most of them are podcasters and not artists, there are some artists out there, and the numbers are insane. People are making so much money, but again, I don't think this should be your goal. It's not impossible, but it's very hard, and the only way to not to be frustrated is not to aim at those numbers, because I'm talking about really, really big numbers. And you can still make a living of your art, even if you are not rich. Okay, so what kind of content can you make for Patreon? Well, I think anything you can think of. There are many ways in which you can monetize your art. You could be making tutorials, you could be sharing high-resolution files, you could be giving people extra art that you don't show anybody else, or sketches, or whatever you feel like drawing. I'm going to tell you about my Patreon now and the experience I had with it. When I first started on Patreon, I thought that I would like to make it a tutorial place. Like, I wanted to make art tutorials and share them with people who paid monthly. And I thought, okay, I have an audience, so maybe this will work. Maybe people will be interested in my tutorials. But they weren't. So what happened? I did have an audience. What happened? The problem was that my audience wasn't interested in tutorials because they weren't artists. So that's something I learned back then, was that you might have an audience for a specific product, but not an audience for anything you want to make. So I had this planned and I failed, and my Patreon wasn't working. So what did I do? I kept on trying. I tried new things. So I decided to remove tutorials from my Patreon because I was making like $70 a month and it wasn't worth it. I took really long to make those tutorials. So I thought of a way to keep my Patreon alive without having to spend time to create new content for it. And what I did was to turn my Patreon into a place where I would share sketches of the illustrations I was sharing online. So I needed to make those sketches anyway because I was drawing those illustrations. And I made those sketches exclusive content for my Patreon. Checking my stats back then, I see that I kept making around the same amount of money, even though the sketch tier was a lot cheaper than the tutorial tier. But the difference was that I wasn't taking any extra time to create those sketches. I was making them anyway. So one thing you need to take into account when you work on something is that what you make in the end is not what determines the value of the work you are making. For example, if you make $10,000 on a job that takes you 2 days, well, that's a lot of money. But if you make $10,000 on a job that's taking you 2 years to complete, then that's very little money for the amount of work that you have to do. I want to keep talking about Patreon a bit more, but first let me change the topic just a bit, because I want to talk to you about the next project that I worked on, which was a webcomic. So I had a steady job as an artist, but I wanted to create my own projects. So some time ago, I decided to create my own webcomic. Around 2017, I discovered there were websites like Webtoon or Tapas where you could post your comics and make money from them. I had tried sending my stories to publishers in France, in the US, but there was no luck. So I thought, okay, maybe I can try this. I can post my comic there for free and see if I can make any money at all. The comic I was working on back then was called Revenge of the Queen, and it was a really long story that had everything I loved about mangas. It had fantasy, it had mysteries, it had a boys' love couple, everything that I liked. So what could go wrong? Well, everything, because hardly anybody read it. People weren't interested, and I didn't meet the criteria to monetize my webcomic. So I found myself working on a story that was really long and really hard to draw for no money at all, because I couldn't monetize my comic there. After giving it some thought, in the end I had to drop that story. You can still read what's available, but I don't think I'm going to continue it anytime soon. So I failed at drawing comics. What did I do? Did I give up? Well, at first I did. Back then I thought that drawing comics just wasn't profitable enough to make a living. So I focused on working on illustrations for video games and such that paid better. But over time, I started feeling this urge to work on my own projects again, to draw my own comics. And I really wanted to draw boys' love. So I thought, okay, let's give drawing comics another chance, because you can never discard something that you love just because you failed once or twice or more times. So anyway, so this time I did what I should have done the first time. Instead of creating a really long story full of plot twists and stuff, I created a short story with only 2 characters that I knew that I could finish within a year. Even if the story didn't give me any money at all, I would finish it, because I was creating it in a way that I knew it wouldn't be a nightmare to finish. I know that building a complex story is really awesome, and if you are lucky enough, you might succeed on your first try, but that's not normal. So I don't recommend that you start with the creation of your life. Just start with something simpler that you can actually finish, because otherwise you'll either have to drop your story that you worked on so much, or you'll have to work on it for free for years. So now I started working on a new boys' love webcomic called The Violinist and the Nerd, and this time the miracle happened. I did meet the criteria to monetize my work. And this is where we go back to Patreon, because I decided to turn my Patreon into a webcomic related place. I started posting chapters ahead on Patreon so that each few days people would get new content and they could always read chapters before they were published for everyone else. And I also shared the sketches and such. So between Patreon, what I was making on Webtoon and Tapas, I started making around $500 a month, which is not a lot, but for me it was an extra, because I was working on this on my free time. I still had a job as an illustrator, and I was having so much fun. which is another very important part of working on comics. So this short story of mine that I finished in December last year actually became a bit longer, because while I was finishing season 1, I had this idea for season 2. And I decided to start working on it right away. People were interested, I was having fun, so I thought, let's do it. My audience kept growing, which made me very happy. But here's a funny fact for you. I had around 70 Patreons when I was posting chapters of my comic to Patreon. And on season 2, there was one adult scene that was exclusive to Patreon. And it was after I posted that scene that my Patreon went from 70 patrons to 280. So as you can see, yaoi sells. But of course, I didn't want everyone to have to pay for my content, so I'm making the whole comic for free, which brings me some income from page views. And I'm only making the yaoi content paid content. I'm talking way too much, and so I'm going to summarize my final thoughts on what I have learned about working as an artist and what I'd like to share with you. First of all, draw a lot. It's the only way to find potential clients and to become better at drawing until someone is interested in buying art from you. Second, and I didn't say this before, but I think it's very important that you keep a list with your prices, so that people can easily see what you're offering and how much they would have to pay for what they want. Knocking on doors is not the only way to be found. Just remember that the fact that you are posting your art online, that people are retweeting it or sharing it into Instagram stories and such, that also helps companies find you. Make sure to advertise your commissions and make sure that everyone knows they are open when they are, because I've seen many artists who don't advertise their commissions at all, that it's very hard to know when they are open for them or not. And you are losing possible clients if they don't know. If people know you are available, there are more chances that they will contact you about it. If something doesn't work out, don't worry too much about it. Just keep trying. Either try another time or make some adjustments to the project, or just keep trying. Build an audience. If you want to start a personal project, try not to start with something that's too big. And last but not least, don't work for other people for free. You are going to find many people who will either request free art from you, and I mean, if they're your friends or you feel like doing it, then just do it. But don't feel forced to do it. Especially those people who say, I'm going to give you exposure. What is exposure? How does that pay for my bills? It doesn't. And half the time, people who tell you that don't even have the audience to give you any exposure at all. So just ask for money for your work. Don't be afraid to ask for money because you are working. Art is not a necessity, it's a luxury. So it is something that people have to pay for if they want it. And that would be all. I hope my experience can help you in some way. And if you have any question, remember you can ask them now. Have fun creating!